So my name is Graham Hughes. I'm going to be your tutor for this webinar today. I'm going to be talking about type building analysis using MAXQDA over the next 45 minutes or so. This is the first time I've tried doing this particular webinar, so it's a little experimental. Don't know quite how long it'll go. And I'm open to questions throughout, I think. So please use the questions item on your dashboard to type questions to me. I've got a second screen so I can see them coming up, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them as you need. So a quick item about me. I'm based in England. I've worked at MAXQDA for about 12 or 13 years now, with all kinds of software over about 30 years. So I'm really quite long in the tooth. Anyway, so let's think about type building analysis, and just hope anybody else who comes in can catch up with us. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some context for type building analysis, what I understand it to be, so that you can understand why I emphasize some of the things that I will be emphasizing during the course of this webinar. Just checking if anybody else has come in. Oh yes, good to have you, Rob. Type building. The basic goal of type building analysis is to generate groups of cases which share strong commonalities within the group. So the groups, inside each group, the cases are homogeneous, but the groups themselves, making different types, are different, making an overall typology which is heterogeneous, where the types have distinctions. So it's all about comparing at the case level, comparisons at the case level. In many ways, it's one of the most traditional forms of research analysis. The very early practitioners in sociology used a kind of type building analysis in their very, very early work. And in my mind, it's also quite similar, particularly with the work in biology back in the 19th century, and so on, the work that Darwin and people like him were doing leading up to the development of the theory of evolution. They were looking at the natural world and putting things together where they saw similarities, putting them into groups. They call them classifications of species and so on, but they were type building effectively. So we're using similar tools, working in a similar sort of way. Oh, jolly, we're getting a few more people in. That's great. Just make a note. So in this type building, the concept of attribute space is a key element to get your head around. It's determined by the codes or themes that you've chosen along which to make your comparisons. I sometimes describe these as being dimensions. At one theoretical level, if you have two aspects, two themes that you're exploring, and each can have two possible values. One common example is in the field of environmental research, where people might be deemed either caring about the environment or not caring about the environment. That's one theme with two possible values on it. And the other is, do they take action to protect the environment? Yes or no. That's a second theme with two dimensions. Then the attribute space has four elements in it. Some people will be both caring about the environment and acting for it. Others will not care about the environment and will do nothing. That's two of the spaces. And then the other two are people who are slightly contradictory. They care about the environment but do nothing about it. Or they don't care about the environment but nonetheless take actions that are protecting of the environment. Those four theoretical possibilities create a typology which completely explains that particular attribute space of those dimensions. You're probably going to be more ambitious than that, but beware, because the number of possible typologies in your types in your typology rapidly expands by the product of your various dimensions and their possible values. So if you have two dimensions with 4 values in each, you've got an theoretical attribute space of 16 possible types. If you say have 5 yes or no kind of dimensions, you'll find that works out to give you 32 possible combinations, including cases where people have 3 of the 5 or 4 of the 5 and so on. So you've got to be a little bit careful in how you define your attribute space. You do need to do some definition of it in advance in order to make sure you collect the right data. So I'm inclined to say that this is not a pure inductive method, type building. You need to plan quite carefully and make sure that you collect all of the data that you need. So your data collection needs to be structured. You don't want to get to a late stage in the analysis and realize that in half the cases you've asked a particular question which you didn't think was that significant at the time, but now it turns out to be very significant, and you wish you'd asked it of the other half of the cases, because then it might give you some really interesting attributes to use. So you've got a plan, you've got to do your literature, you've got to know what you're expecting to find. And then there are various ranges of ways of working. I've discussed just now a theoretical attribute space with 4 possibilities of two part dimensions. But there are also ways of working type building, which this webinar will probably lend itself more closely to, where you're looking for what are termed natural types. Where you're a bit more exploratory, and you're not quite sure exactly what the types are going to mean and who's going to fit into them, and you're looking to explore the possibilities around a range of dimensions. But you do need to collect all of the data for that. At the end of the exercise, if you've got a typology attribute space with, say, 10 possible attributes, you need to have a reasonable number of cases in each of those types to be able to justify what they have in common and how they differ from each other. And to do that, you probably need at least 4 or 5 cases in most of those boxes. Some of the extreme ones you might get away with only 1 or 2 because they're clearly extreme. So you need to consider how many cases, how much data you need to collect in terms of the number of cases, how many themes you need to cover, how you're going to structure all of those interviews to make sure that you cover all of the dimensions that you might need to use to put your type building together. There's a lot to think about, a lot of reading you probably need to do to prepare yourself for this, to make sure that you can be successful. A general compromise that I suggest is to sample as many cases as you can reasonably achieve and ask questions for more dimensions, more themes, more topics than you expect to use, because you don't know which ones will turn out to be successful and which ones unsuccessful. So collect more data than you will probably end up using in the final analysis, and then there's a fair chance that some of that data you will have enough of to build an adequate typology. You'll use the tools of MAXQDA then to explore that data in different groupings, and that's where this program will become really, really helpful. But you've got to be a little bit careful in that approach not to go fishing for neat and tidy groups that don't actually have any theoretical justification for them. Be careful of fishing for neat answers which actually don't make sense in the real world. So you need to ground everything in good literature review, a good understanding of your topic, rather than thinking you can go out and conduct some unstructured interviews with a range of people and then do a type building analysis afterwards. You'll run into big trouble that way because you'll find just as you think you're really making progress in one area, that several other people didn't talk about vital topics, and you'll end up making heroic interpretations of what they might have said had you remembered to ask them or had you been aware. One further point, your typology, your dimensions, do not have to be limited to coding, to coded data. You can use variables as one or more of your dimensions in this, and MAXQDA makes that very, very easy to do. So last emphasis, the analysis is based on cases, not on themes or attributes. Yes, coding is absolutely vital, coding for themes, attributes in variables and attributes in terms of the dimensions of your type building. But in the end, you are looking at whole cases and putting each whole case into a box. Each case in your sample needs to fit into one type and one type only. You can't have one person appearing in two different types, and you can't put part of a person into one type and another part of that person into another type. It is whole cases. This is fairly different from quite a lot of other aspects of qualitative analysis. So here's a list of the functions that I'm going to be talking about from within MAXQDA. And I'll come back to this slide from time to time so that you can pick up on the various things. It explores a broad movement from very text manual, text grounded work, from a pure perspective, working the way our forefathers would probably have done this, even without computers, through to much more automated or semi-automated, more quantitative calculating things in things like the document map and similarity analysis, which are quite quantitative tools. We'll move towards that, but we'll start very much in the grounded area. And let's go into MAXQDA now. Now, for most of this, I'm going to be using the work-life balance English language example, project example, which is available to every user of MAXQDA, whether you're using the trial version of the program on its 14-day trial, or you've got a full license. All of them come with 6 different examples, 2 of them in English. For most of this, I'm going to be using the work-life balance example. And in that, I've got a little set of 10 interviews, which is where I'm going to draw most of my example data from. And these people, they were asked questions about the relationship between their time spent working and their leisure life, their home life, their family life, and so on, and how they felt about that balance between work and the rest of their life. It's not a perfect project, it's not perfect data, and it will struggle to illustrate some of the points. You're going to have to use some imagination to come along with me. But let's see how we can go with this. So a suggestion that Udo Kuckartz makes in his book, I'll just point out his book, Qualitative Text Analysis, Udo Kuckartz, published by Sage. I'll give you that back again later on, is that one approach is that you should start, having collected your data, by straight away writing a case summary for each of your interviews. And MAXQDA provides you with a good place to put that in the document memo. So having imported the transcript of the interview, we can open up a memo for one of our cases here called TAN. And we've got a very brief summary here, which isn't going to be enough for doing a type building analysis. But this is a quick illustration of the sort of thing where you start, you read the full transcript, you think about the things that are most salient in it to you, that are possibly most relevant to the way you expect your analysis is going to go, and you write a quick summary and put it in the document memo. That's anchored yourself at the start, and you can build up, and this will show you which documents have memos and which do not, so you can see where you've still got work to do. You then code your data for the various themes that you've already identified as the ones that are likely to give you enough scope to build some typologies. Now, I want to emphasize, I'm not going to go into coding work in great detail. Some of this data isn't going to work very well because the coding has been done a little bit loosely. For type building, When you attach a code, you need to have a very clear idea of the meaning of that code, because all attachments of that code need to be very consistent with each other. It won't work. We've got a code here, say childcare. It won't work simply to code all references to childcare in one code and think we can then build a type around that. Some of those people will be talking about childcare as a problem. I don't have enough time. It's very difficult to get good childcare around this place. My employer doesn't give me sufficient time to leave work in time to pick up my child from childcare, that kind of thing. And other people might be saying, I'm very fortunate, I've got good childcare arrangements, so I can be confident when I'm at work that my child is well looked after, and so on. Those are quite different aspects of childcare, quite different meanings, and so they need to have different codes attached to them so that we can separate the people for whom childcare is a problem, an issue, from those where childcare has been sorted out and they're quite comfortable. Just a little example. So your coding needs to be strong, very, very channeled and consistent. And then the next step when you've done that is to look at the summary part of the analysis menu. So we've got 3 summary tools on the analysis menu here. Now, you may not all have considered these, but let's have a look at them. I'm going to start with the summary grid. So I've opened up the summary grid. Actually, I'm going to close it down because I just want to limit it a little bit to just a limited amount. I'm going to limit it only to the interviews and the current work-life balance. Let's start it again. And now, because we've got the filters for just the activated documents and codes, I've got a more manageable amount of data. This screen works with 3 panels. On the left, we've got a bit like the Code Matrix browser. Anywhere where there's a little blue blob, it means that there are one or more data segments coded to the code for that row and falling within the document for that column. So there is a segment in the document Chris attached to flexible hours. That's what the blue blobs mean. Where there's a green outline, it means that not only is there at least one data segment, and by clicking on it, I've highlighted that coded segment in the middle here, but it means that I have also written a summary in the 3rd panel. This panel, this window, is a free text window where you can type directly in as you move around. So if I click on this volunteering one for TAN, there are 2 coded segments coded to volunteering for TAN. I can scroll up and down and read those 2 segments here in the middle, and then I can data reduce those. I can write a summary in my own words, quite possibly. You can do copy and paste for little key phrases and so on. You do a mixture of your own words and your respondents' words, but I can build in here in the summary window a summary of, I'm just going to type in TAN's views, except I can't type very well, on volunteering, just so we can recognize that when we see that later on. You can type free text. I'm not going to get about, but actually doing it there. And as soon as I've typed something in there, we get a green box here. The red outline is showing which one I'm actually looking at. So if I move on to, say, the childcare here for Selim, Selim's got 3 data segments talking about childcare. So quite a lot of data there. You can see as I scroll that has been reduced into this, has 3 children and spends a lot of time with caring for them, wishes to spend more time with children, and so on. So this is data reduction, and you can make this data reduction, this summary, very focused on your growing understanding of what each of these themes or dimensions could possibly be meaning in the context of your type building purpose. So this grid here shows you your progress in how you've been working at creating your summaries. The green boxes mean you've got a summary. The blue buttons mean there's work still to be done, and so on. When you've done your summaries, we can then move into the summary table, which has a box there on the main menu, on the analysis menu, or also you can jump straight into it from the summary grid. So I'll go from here, and that opens up a new window on the top. I've got tools here that you can explore in more detail if you want to use this. But you've got a list of tables that have already been created, so we can jump in to see different displays, different table displays, and I've got got one here I'm going to be using which I've called time and childcare. Now, in this table, I've got a column for each of my main respondents running across here, and I've selected some particular themes with childcare and free time and satisfied with time spent working in particular amongst them. And you can see here some of these themes. Now, unfortunately, I didn't write a summary for TAN in the right one. What was the one that I did for TAN? It was on volunteering. Okay, so I could make a new table, and when I choose my documents and codes, if I add in the volunteering code as well as the others, and okay, now I've got a column for volunteering. I'm going to down here, I'm just going to swing the columns around. There is TAN, and there is the one that you saw me type in, TAN's views on volunteering. So what you type in on the summary grid appears in the summary table, and just your summary stands in for all of that other data that you reduced into this. And so now we have the data in more manageable volumes, so we can look across a row like childcare or volunteering and read our summaries of how different people have spoken about them and begin to see possible patterns of possible commonalities between some of our cases in certain of these dimensions, and this is giving us some pointers towards how we might move on and build some typologies. You can have as many tables as you like. You saw me create a new one, new summary table 1, adding in the volunteering there. I can rename it quite easily here. Just click on it. Rename, right click and rename, and I'm just going to call it volunteering and time. So it's as easy as that. So you can store multiple ones. They are dynamic. So if you change some summaries and then reopen the table, the new summaries will come in. And hopefully you can begin to see how these tools together can begin to give you some ways of working. Now, you'll notice on these columns some little memo symbols. And in these, we can jump into the document memo for any one of these cases. And if we're seeing a strong pattern amongst some dimensions down here, we can jump into the document memo with a click here. That opens it up, and in the lower half of the document memo window is a good place to type the summary that is coming into our heads reading that summary. I've just typed some nonsense in there, but you can see how you can work from, and I can then close that, from the summary table and store your conclusions in those memos. And if I use the facility to invert the rows and columns, so now my cases are in rows and my themes, my dimensions are in columns, I've got the possibility of doing the same working by summaries of the codes or themes. And this might lead me to create some things that could be identifying the possible useful dimensions across one of these themes. And so on. So the same thing, I click on that, there's a double click, opens up the code memo for the theme free time self-care. And again, down here, I can type in my ideas that are coming to me from this summary table and then close it. So that just gives us the beginning of some ways of working. I'm going to close those because I spent a little bit too much time on that. I'll come back to the Summary Explorer much later on. But that is the first couple of areas, building up writing from the very beginning and working very much closely with your texts, thinking in terms of text, thinking in terms of words, and so on. But now let's move on up a gear, as it were, and start to use some more power of the computer to look at things using things like the Code Matrix browser and the interactive quote matrix. I'm going to reset my things, and for this I just need to switch into a different project because I've been having some difficulty with this particular data set and the next thing I want to demonstrate to you. So I'm just gone into the life satisfaction, which has a similar structure with interviews, but they're working about how satisfied they are with their life rather than their work-life balance. And I'm just going to work with some 7 documents in the New York and how they've talked about people. And I hope you're familiar with the Code Matrix browser. So I'm just opening up the Code Matrix browser for activated documents and codes. And there we have a Code Matrix browser with my New York documents and these people codes. And I'll just demonstrate Teresa has not had very much coding work done. So I'm going to deactivate Teresa, and that removes Teresa from that table, which is quite handy, and so on. So you can add or remove the row and column count totals with this sigma here to see this. And some people go looking for patterns. They might use the squares and highlight patterns across the row. I'm making the squares proportional to the sizes row by row, so we can see that for the row friends, George has the largest square, so George has talked about friends more than anybody else, followed by Kim. But for the row parents, it's Joanna has talked about parents more than anybody else. Or we can work by column with this setting. Now George, he's talked about his friends a lot, but he's also talked about people in general, almost as much as he's talked about friends. In Max, we can see that Max has talked about his partner, his or her partner, not sure whether Max is male or female, a little bit more than the others in that column, and so on. So that's one way that you can go looking at patterns. Let's come back to this one, you might look at it in terms of heat maps. But something that you may not have paid very much attention to is there is one other tool on here, this one which I'm pointing to, which when I hover over it, the little help tip comes, sort columns by similarity of code patterns and sum of frequencies. And that, in the context of type building, sounds quite interesting. Now, at the moment, I haven't clicked it yet. The columns are clearly in the order of the document system here, but let's click on it, and the order has changed. Now, Vinny has come from last to first, followed by George, and then Max. Now, the data isn't very exciting here, and it's not absolutely clear exactly on what parameters this sort is going on. If you think this tool could be interesting to you, you'll need to read up a little bit more in the reference manual about it and run some experiments to test it out. But I just wanted to draw your attention to the good old Code Matrix browser. Even that can begin to start giving us the possibility of grouping things together by the similarity of their code frequencies if the way you've coded means that makes sense. I'm just going to turn the heat map off, just turn it back to numbers. The other thing I want to draw your attention to on this toolbar in the Code Matrix browser is the very first button, which is called the Interactive Quote Matrix. Now that is available also on the Mixed Methods Analysis ribbon, Mixed Methods menu ribbon, but here it will jump this particular table into an interactive quote matrix, which comes up on top of the other table. I'm just going to minimize it a bit so you can see both tables are on my screen at the same time, one in front of the other. Unfortunately, at the moment, the interactive quote matrix does not pick up the revised order of the documents that we've got in the code system here. But let's see, can I drag George across? Often in this, you can drag things across. No, I can't move the columns around. So this doesn't fit quite so well with what I've just demonstrated, but it's a way of moving behind the numbers where you might start to place too much emphasis on a big 5 here. What does that 5 mean? That's in George. Well, down here we can see all of the segments for those 5 coded segments for George, where he's talking about people in general. If I click on a different code, such as the friends code, I get different data. So we can select one code at a time and display all the coded segments for that code in this table. And by scrolling left and right, I can move across different cases, different documents, and each of the columns is independently scrollable, independent of the other columns, and so on. So you can move around your data very, very easily within this interactive quote matrix, even at the individual case level. Now I'm going to close those. Now we'll come again. The interactive quote matrix is more powerful once we begin to get some groups, because if I go to the mixed methods and come to the interactive quote matrix from here, we can define a new one choosing whatever codes we want, but we can group the documents into document groups or document sets, or even by the values on individual document variables. And that becomes very powerful at a much later stage of your type building. So back to this. So that's the code matrix browser and interactive quote matrix. They give you some quantitative tools looking for patterns in the code frequencies and patterns of codes. And they allow you to move into back into the text and work with your growing understanding of those patterns back at the text level. Now the next one is code configurations, and I'm going to go back to my main example project, which is the work-life balance example, which I want to work on. So now for this, I'm going to go to the analysis menu and use the function, two of the functions in this code configurations. And this really does begin to look much more like type building as we do this. I'm going to activate all of my interviews. And for this, I'm going to activate, I'm going to start to explore some possible dimensions on which we might build a tentative typology here. So people have talked a bit about flexible hours. So let's just assume for the moment that where they've talked about flexible hours, they're saying they do have flexible hours. We'll have the childcare. I'm just selecting some codes which have got reasonable frequencies. And do they have enough free time for self-care? And are they satisfied with, no, let's have dissatisfied with time for their friends and family. So I've selected 4 codes and I've got 10 documents in play. And I'm going to go for the code configurations and look at a simple code configuration diagram for that. Because I've got some activations, I can insert activated codes in one click. I could nonetheless still pick codes and drag them in at this stage. I've got the tick for only activated documents, so that's limited my data. Now I've got possible settings here. I can look for co-occurrence at the level of the segment, at the level of the document, at the level of the document group, or sets. I've only got one document group in play, so I'm going to do it at the level of documents. And I can similarly choose differentiation of results. That will make more sense when you've seen how the table works. I'm going to set it at co-occurrence of codes within documents and differentiate by documents as well. And let's click OK. And here is my simple code configuration table. On the left-hand side, I have a diagrammatic expression of the attribute space that comes with 4 possible codes. There are 16 theoretically possible combinations of 4 codes. Only 5 of those 16 have actually arisen in this small data set. Let's just make some of these columns a little bit narrower so we can see a bit more data over at the right-hand side. And over here, I can squeeze the columns because the names are quite short so that we can get to see as much of the data as possible. MAXQDA is great for giving you this flexibility to polish your tables even after. Have we got everybody? No, Anna. Bring that in, and there we are. Now I've got the whole table. So now a blue blob tells me that there is some data coded in the top row within a document, because we chose to set this at the document level. There are some documents which have codes for flexible hours, free time for self-care, but also dissatisfied with time for friends and families. Those 3 codes occur in 4 documents. These three codes, childcare, free time for self-care, and dissatisfied with time, occur in 3 documents. So that's a different possible combination. That all 4 occurring together arises just once in 1 document. And similarly, the flexible hours only with free time, but not the others, in 1 document. And lastly, childcare and dissatisfied with time in 1 document. And those sum to 10, which is correct because there are 10 documents activated in play, and each document has got to figure once in this table. So that will always sum to the number of your documents when you are working at the document level. But here I can see the patterns of which documents these are. So the 4 documents in this top row happen to be Matteo, Riley, Amadi, and Anna. The 3 documents in the second row will be different: Selim, Tan, and David. Now, in some ways, this kind of presentation might lead us to start looking at Matteo, Riley, Amadi, and Anna as being in one particular type, and Selim, Tan, and David as being in another type. The data isn't really strong enough to really justify that, but hopefully you can begin to get some idea of that. The same thing opened up too. We've got a simple code configuration detail view and summary view. And in this detail view, if I click into this window, we get a row for each of the 10 documents, and it just shows for each of those documents which pattern it is fitting within from these patterns. I think we can see that information perfectly well across here, but it's just another way of looking at it. So I think you may well find that this grouping can give you an insight into how your typologies may build up. So that's how the simple code configuration works for that. You may ask, what is the complex code configuration? I don't have suitable data for doing this. If you are interested in following this up and you think these code configurations could be useful for you, there is a very good example in the reference manual of the complex code configurations. Some research, you'll have to imagine this, in some kind of nursery school or child care setting, where group of code 1, the group of codes identifies adults or teachers or carers interacting with the children, a code for each carer. Code 2 identifies the children interacting with carers, a code for each child. And code 3 identifies the kind of activity, the kind of game that they're playing. In the complex code configuration, we'll be looking for interactions which involve any one of a group of teachers, any one of the children, and any one of certain activities. And then we're looking to see how those patterns co-occur in the complex code configuration. I'm not going to go through with that. I will also just come back to the simple code configurations, and I've still got my same codes here. If I do co-occurrence of codes within segments, rather than just within the documents, that's a tougher condition, that they've actually talked about childcare at the same time as being dissatisfied with time for friends and family and flexible hours or something, all within the same segment. Let's just run this one and have a look at it. We've got far fewer. Well, actually, we've still got 6 rows, but it seems a lot thinner in terms of data. You may be puzzled as to why there are only 15 theoretically. I'm puzzled why there are only 15 theoretically possible combinations. The one possible combination that doesn't come in the segments is null, 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 null. Because there are an almost infinite number of coded segments could be defined where none of these codes is present in all the rest of the interviews and so on. So that is not a theoretically possible combination. We've got no cases where all 4 codes are paired together. And in fact, there's only 2 situations where 2 codes co-occur in the same segment. Here, flexible hours and childcare, and only 1 document features that that. Which one is it? It's Kazumi. Has talked about childcare and flexible hours in the same segment, and flexible hours and free time occurs just once, and that's Riley here in that. So that tougher condition, let's come back to this again and look at the simple code configuration. That was where I chose for co-occurrence within segments. This differentiation of results is giving me the right-hand half of the table. Differentiating by document means I can identify which documents certain combinations of codes have arisen in. So that's code configurations, and that looks quite a bit like type building. Coming back to my tables here. I'm just checking for questions, and I see that Jacob asked, will a recording of this session be available? Yes, indeed, Jacob, it will. To those of you who have attended, it will be, a link will be sent to you sometime next week, I think. So now let's start getting more exciting with the visual tools and going more quantitative with things like the profile comparison chart and the document comparison chart. On the visual tools and the profile comparison chart. I think I've got to select some data first of all. Oh no, it does come up, yes. So in this one, we don't need to do activation beforehand. I'm going to select documents and select codes with these tools, and it will become apparent. I need single documents to begin with, and from the list of all of the documents, I'm going to pick Selim and Tan and Amadi and Kazumi just for the little bit at random, and click OK. I've picked 4. They get added in here, and a color is allocated to each of them at random. Now I'm going to select some codes as dimensions by which I want to see how similar these 4 cases are across particular codes. So I'm going to have the childcare code, the free time for childcare, the dissatisfied with time for friends and family. Let's have a look at those 3 first off. And this gives me this pattern across the 4. Now, there seem to be 3 lines. So what is actually happening here is that if I click on Selim, I can see that Selim's line is this brown line, which is coming down here and across there. And if I click on Kazumi, I can see that Kazumi has exactly the same line. So Selim and Kazumi are going across exactly in sync with each other. So they are looking like possibly a little type. Whereas Amadi has no references to childcare, 2 references to free time, that's the 2 at the top there, and no references for satisfied with time for friends and family. And Tan is the straight line across the very top. When I hover over any one of these, their line is highlighted. So now I can come back to select documents and I can add in more documents if I want. So let's bring in, say, Tatiana and Tatiana and David. I'm not doing this a little bit at random. The diagram gets a little bit more complicated. Still, Selim and Kazumi are going to be in line with each other. Their line is now moving differently across here because we've got some different values in this column by the looks of things. So they become a straight line across here. Have we got anybody else working together? Amadi and David are in parallel for the second half, but they're a little bit different on the first. And Tan continues right across the top, but is joined by David for the last link across here. I can add in variables. So let's have the number of children. Let's add in the number of children as another one, and that's added on at the right-hand end. So we can see they're all different, almost all different. When I point to any point on the scale, the little tip-up thing comes telling me that Tan, Kazumi, and Tatiana rather, all have 1 child. So they're all together there, and this is David, who has 2 children, and this is Selim, who has 3, and this is Amadi, who has none. The number of children they have might have a bearing on how many times they talk about childcare, and also whether they're satisfied with time for their family and so on. But it looks as though no, they're not. Was that the satisfied or the dissatisfied? Oh, I think I must have selected the satisfied one. Let's just check. Yes, I chose satisfied. Perhaps that should have been dissatisfied with time for friends and family. Change the code. This is very flexible. Now we get the dissatisfied and we get a different pattern again. Now, if you can get this so you get a number of lines moving very closely together, then you are beginning to see a type emerging from the data in this very visual way. As I say, the data I'm working with isn't very helpful for this. I want to just draw your attention to some ways that you can use color in this. At the moment, I've got each profile different, but I could color it by reference to the number of children on the variable line. So now the people with 3 children are colored in blue, the people with 2 children get orange, and those with 1 child are all green. So Tan, Kazumi, and Tatiana all end up on that 3 children one. So it becomes slightly easier to see how similar their lines are when I move between them over here, because they're the 3 green lines. And I can see that this number of children is having quite a big impact on the growing idea of types that I'm seeing here. From this color, you can also, if you're using this a lot, you can create. Did you know that you can attach a color to each document in the document system, and then use those colors? So if I just close this and do a right click and say, let's make Tan red, and Amadi light blue, and Kazumi yellow, say, and then reopen the profile comparison chart. And here we are. And now I've got the same data, but now I choose to make it color by the document system. Most of them are coming blue, but Tan has a red line. So if I often looking at Tan, he'll always come up red on this, and Kazumi has a yellow line, and Amadi has a light blue line. So I can, by choosing all my colors over here, I can make this chart work by selecting the color by document system rather than each profile different and so on. So lots of things that you can do with color that way. And then the document comparison chart, I can work with color in the code system like this. Let me activate all my interview documents and activate, say, the satisfaction and dissatisfaction codes, and open up the document comparison chart for only activated documents and codes. And I get this pattern, seeing where they've talked about their satisfaction right through the interviews. That's interesting. The red are dissatisfaction, the green are satisfaction codes. But now, let me close that. Now, let's say I'm particularly interested in the satisfied with workplace. So let's make that a dark purple. And dissatisfied with time for friends and family, let's make that a bright yellow and rerun the document comparison chart for the same data. And now you can see those particular codes, just the dissatisfied with time for friends and family, there's an awful lot of that yellow appearing quite early on in the interviews, because these are paragraph numbers of the interviews, but they've gone off that towards the end. And the satisfied with workplace, the purple, is popping up more generally spread right through the interview. I think. So depending on how your themes and colors are looking, and also you can look across your cases and you might spot some patterns where cases are working together in terms of these patterns across here. So you'll be looking for similar patterns, similar blocks, case by case, and by hiding some of your cases, you might be able to group them together. So that's a way that you can use the document comparison chart, possibly not quite as directly type building as the profile comparison chart. And now, document map and similarity analysis for documents. Ooh, didn't mean to do that. What have I done? Oh, help. Just various things getting in the way. The document map. Let's come and look at this. So now for the document map, I need the mixed methods. No, I don't. I need the visual tools. It's in the visual tools. Here's document map. I possibly need, no, just like the profile comparison chart, I select some my documents and codes. So let's select some single documents. Well, actually, I'm going to have everyone except Matteo, I think. Matteo, we've got the audio file for it. So those are the documents. And I'm going to select some codes. Now, I want some codes which are going to be reasonably distinctive across here. You'll see I quite often use some of these, dissatisfied with time for friends and family. So I've selected, I think that's 4 codes. Let's click OK. Oh, that's curious. I wasn't expecting to get a straight line like that. Let's just try adding another code and see what happens if I have satisfied with workplace. Okay. Just playing around with the settings, and I confused myself slightly in there. Let's just go back and take off the satisfied with workplace one, I think was the last one I put in, and it recalculates. Now, what I've got here is a 2-dimensional representation of a multi-dimensional space. With 4 codes in play, in theory, I think I possibly got 4 dimensions that we could be trying to explore. Can you see, it might be a little bit difficult over the webinar software, but there are different colors. Riley, Chris, and 2 documents here have a light blue color. Kazumi, David, and Tan have a green color. And Tatiana and Selim over here have a darker blue color. MAXQDA in this document map is suggesting 3 groups here, one with Riley, Chris, Amadi, and Arn, another with Kazumi, David, and Tan, and a third with Tatiana and Selim. They are clustered according to the similarity of their frequency with which the 4 codes I'm using have come together. So this is an automated way of creating some types. It's a very powerful tool, but just like powerful tools like chainsaws, in the wrong hands, they can be incredibly damaging. So don't think that you can just jump in and click a few buttons in this, go into this document map and straight away come up with meaningful, successful types. An awful lot of reading and background research will be necessary before you can really understand what is going on behind the scenes. You've got various options here. There are 2 key options. Are you going to work by frequency of codes or simply occurrence, presence or absence? And that's where I seem to get a single dimension here with them all on a straight line going on the occurrence. I'm not quite sure exactly what's going on there. And for each of those, you have 2 or more possible ways of calculating. So if I go for the distance measure block distance, I get a different map. I might get a very similar, no, I think Tan has moved to a different place. So the distance measure is giving me a completely different grouping. The occurrence have more possible ways of grouping, of calculating these. And now I've got off the straight line with this similarity measure Jacquard and so on. So you've got to do an awful lot of reading to find out what is going on behind these. In the format, you have the chance to choose how many clusters do you want to create. Let me come back to here and go for my frequency measure and my squared Euclidean and come to my format. At the moment, I've got 3 clusters. Let's push that up to 4. And now we should see, yes, Riley has been separated from Chris and Amadi and Anna. Riley is a separate cluster now. Kazumi, David, and Tan come together. Selim and Tatiana come together. Just because 2 things appear close on this 2 dimensions doesn't mean necessarily they are always going to be close. One might be very near us on a 3rd dimension and the other much further away. You've got all sorts of things you can explore in this format, different ways you can display. You can have it displaying the number of codes that are being shared in common and so on in there. Lots and lots of things you can do on that map. That's the document map as one way of creating it. And behind the document map, from the mixed methods, we can look at the similarity analysis for documents, which works on the same calculations as that document map, but displays the results in a table grid with the actual quantifications. So here, my similarity matrix, no, actually, let's start with the similarity matrix. That is it. If we look, we've got the same documents making up our rows and our columns. So down this leading diagonal, we have a series of 1s because Tan is always perfectly correlated with Tan and Chris is always perfectly correlated with Chris. So 1 represents perfect correlation in this chart. So I've got the heat map display turned on. The darker the darker the color, the closer. So we appear to have a perfect match between Tatiana and Selim here with this one in this cell here. We have another perfect match between Riley and Amadi here with this one as well, whereas these 0.33s are a long way apart and so on. So this gives you a different way of looking at it where you can more closely quantify in your own head what is going on and look for some patterns. But the calculations, if you go into the reference manual behind this similarity analysis for documents, you'll find there are all the explanations of things like Jacquard and Radiker and so on, and the block square and the simple Euclidean square and things. They're all more closely explained in the reference manual behind them. But if I start a new one here, I have the chance to work by presence or absence or code frequency. And again, if I go for code frequency, I have the choice of squared Euclidean or block. But if I go for the existence of code, I have the choice of simple matching, Jacquard, Cookhartz and Radiker, or Russell and Rao, and so on. Cookhartz and Radiker are familiar names to me. They will become familiar to you because they are closely involved with all of the developments of MAXQDA, and particularly these kind of tools and so on. They have published on these, so they're worth reading about how to use them in MAXQDA. So this is the setup, and here is the link to the reference manual for this particular tool. And I am running out of time fast, so let me close that down. I gallop that last bit a little bit fast, possibly. Just one last possibility using Max Maps. Let me just go to the visual tools and open up Max Maps. In the document models, you can have a 2 cases model. So I can drag 2 documents together in here. Let's have Amadi and Kazumi as my 2 cases. And now it's showing me, I don't know how familiar you are with the Max Maps. This is a halfway house. It's got a gray background because I can still change the settings of over here as to the 5 most frequent codes per column, or we could have the 10, we can have more codes in there and so on. Let's go with that. Let's use that model. So now I can see the whole model. I can minimize that. So here is my model, and I can move. I might need to just make it a tiny bit smaller to fit it all on. These codes in the middle are all of the ones, whoops, didn't mean to move that, all the ones that are shared by Amadi and Kazumi. So these are all the things they have in common. So these are why they look very similar. If we pick any groups of these, they'll come up as very similar. But these codes on the outside are the ones that Amadi has been coded to, which do not appear in Kazumi's document. And these ones over here are in Kazumi's document, which do not appear in Amadi's. So with this, I can stop dazzling myself with some simple similarities, and I can start warning myself that actually they're very different, these two. They have all sorts of things that are different between them. So just be careful. We had a 1 on a perfect match, didn't we, on that similarity analysis on the last diagram I was showing you. Because I just happened to pick only codes that were shared exactly between two particular documents. But there will be all sorts of other codes where they are different. So the max maps 2 cases models can be useful for you there. And note, if I take it, sorry, it was the document model, the 2 cases model there. If I start another one, it says drag 2 documents or document groups or document sets from the document system here. So I've got a set of interviewees with children and interviewees without children, sorry, without children and with children. And I can see lots of codes in common. Let's use that model and just make it the right size. So these are all the codes that occur somewhere in the documents in each of these 2 groups. But there are some codes which are in the interviewees with children which are not appearing in the interviewees without children. Childcare. No great surprise that only interviewees with children have actually talked about childcare. 13 coded segments of that. None of the interviewees who don't have children have mentioned childcare in their interviews. So there is just a quick example. Now, those sets that I've used might be your embryonic types in your typology. You might think I've got a type coming along here, which is looking good, and I can look at some pairwise matchings of 2 types within my growing typology and look for, are there things which ought to ring alarm bells? This should not ring alarm bells because it makes sense. This is closely related to the fact that they do have children, but the without children is simply using a variable rather than a thematic code to distinguish things here. I think I've briefly covered all of those tools. Hopefully, I've started up some ideas in your minds. Nobody's come up with any questions. I'm slightly disappointed, but we have used the whole hour. Has anybody got a last-minute question? Please use the questions tab and pile it in. If you want to ask me anything. Otherwise, I think we've probably got time to bring the session to an end.